Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, wow, they're alive. This is interesting. Welcome to Human-Centered Design for the Digital Age. We're going to get started now, and I'll do some quick introductions real quick. Oh, God, I'm getting repetitive already. This is a bad sign. My name is Stephan. I'm the Experience Design Domain Lead for Testing and Research at the Nerdery. And before I have the mic kind of move down the path, and we'll do individual introductions. I think that's better than me trying to do justice to everyone myself. I've got just a quick grounding baseline garden variety definition of human-centered design just to frame up our conversation today. This is bastardized from Wikipedia because I always start with Wikipedia because, you know, it's supposed to be the source of truth for everything, right? Human-centered design is a framework that develops solutions to problems by involving the human perspective in all steps of the problem-solving process. That involvement typically takes the form of observing the problem within context, collaboration, testing, and implementing the solution with the constituents served. But what does this mean when the options and possibilities offered by the technology blur the lines between helpful affordances and purposeful behavior modification? A tricky business to be sure, but thankfully we've got a panel of experts here who are going to be able to walk us through this landscape. And with that, I'm going to hand this to the next person in line.
Hi, my name is Hilary Dixon. I'm a designer at the Nerdery, working along with Christopher. I'm also a UX researcher. And what else should we say to introduce ourselves in this context?
Well, you could speak a little bit about how you're interested in human-centered design and future technology, because that is our broad remit.
Okay. Well, I recognize some of you from my talk earlier on mixed reality and ethics and persuasive design versus dark patterns, so that's sort of an introduction to my interest in this space. I'd say broadly I'm interested in involving people who use products more in the production of those products, especially as we move into IoT technologies or pervasive mixed reality and augmented reality technologies that overlay on the shared physical space that we all inhabit. So not just contained within your phone, but everywhere, all of the time. I feel like we should all have some input and some say and control in what that looks like and feels like.
I'm Mike Haeg. I'm an independent UX UI designer. Right now I'm working with Agosto on their SkyKit program and with on a medical device for senior citizens through Lab 651's IoT device. I'm also an experiential artist. I've been fellowed at the Walker to help them work with public engagement through their open field program. And when I'm not doing UX, I'm also a potter, which is the best UX experience ever. My interest is definitely more on the artful side of things. I do very much, I think it's very important, the emotional responses that people have to the things that we do. And I've kind of, I feel like a watchdog sometimes, and that's why I like to stay around the industry, just to make people, you know, accountable to people. So that'll pass.
Hey, I'm Matt Edwards. I'm a senior UX designer at Amazon here in Minneapolis. Let's see, interest in UX. I always find it hard to talk about this. It's a little more broad. Basically what happened is I started as a cell phone salesman, like about maybe 10 years ago now. I was dealing a lot with, like in a very real way, dealing with the digital divide. We had a lot of people coming in who didn't understand the technology that was sort of, they felt like being inflicted upon them, cell phones and things like that. Really just wanted to, I started to develop a passion for design when I realized I wanted to humanize this technology for people. As that evolved, it became more about not only humanizing it, but making it ethically fair and good to the people who are using it.
All right, feel free to use microphone number 2 as well, just for future purposes. All right, so I want to start out with one question. So the remit of the panel is really about understanding human-centered design for future technology, when already we may or may not feel like we've got the future kind of creeping into our lives in ways maybe that we didn't expect, in slow and insidious ways. And while none of us have a hoverboard or a jetpack yet, stuff is happening that is really involving your personal data, your freedom, how you're treated by systems, how you're able to interact in your advocate or your self-agency and advocacy within those systems. And I wanted to start with a question about kind of status, really. And I want to know what kind of opportunities the three of you see for human-centered design to significantly improve our world, our quality of life, and our future technological trajectory. I'll let go of this.
This one's really big and broad and tough and kind of hard to answer, but also I think you're going to find, I'm probably not speaking alone for myself here, I think this industry has turned me into a very cynical kind of person. And a lot of the time it's really easy to get caught up in the details of how the stuff we do is actually is very questionable if we're actually making anything better. You know, a lot of the time, really good initial efforts can trickle down into very harmful details. So I think sometimes it's really hard to keep our eyes focused on the big picture. What we're trying to achieve, we're never going to ever perfectly achieve it, but we can broadly move things in the right direction. I think, like, obviously technology is, it's starting to erase borders, it's starting to close the world, it's starting to make it easier for me to understand the felt life experience of somebody on the other side of the planet. It's starting to help me understand the complexity and just insane, immense size of the problems the world has. It helps me feel like I can do something about those problems, even if it's small. I think that's something that technology brings to us. Now, it's a nasty trade-off. There's a lot that comes to that with that, but that's where human-centered design provides a valuable entry point. It helps us frame those problems and help us remember that people are at the forefront of that.
You know, I don't know. As I look forward, one of the things that I think is that there's a great opportunity for is the catalyzing individuals to grow and find themselves as an individual in this world, and I think there's great opportunities there. I think there's great opportunities in education, in even brand relations with that sort of focus. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's where we go. I think we find the human abilities right now, or the human reactions, the human components in something, and we use those to, you know, kind of inflict want. There's a certain amount of just saturation. I think that one of the things that I would like to start to see these tools get to would be, I always think about Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? These people had computers to do absolutely everything, so what did they do? You know, they played saxophone, you know, or even the robot, you know, even Data had computers to do all his work, and so he'd study painting and Shakespeare. And I don't see that, you know, I look forward to getting to that point where we're not so saturated in a bazillion solutions that are trying to make our lives better, that we have no life left, that we don't have that aspirational or personal growth. So,
got one of my own. So my answer has to do with something that there's actually already an industry for, which would be urban design. And so I'd want to be very conscious of tech not kind of blustering in and being like, we have the solution, it's a technology solution, it'll be great. But maybe working more in concert to overcome some of the existing structural challenges, and the structure being bureaucratic. But personally, I'm not a fan of highways. I'm not a fan of a car-centric city. I really like Minneapolis, partly because of the bike lanes. I mean, amazing bike lanes. I think only Portland scores better in the US for the bike lanes. I've never been able to bike to work or bike to the grocery store or bike to see my friends until I moved to Minneapolis. And I'd like to see more cities designed to help people get to places. Maybe just the bus system, like making the bus system run efficiently and work well for people, having more routes and routes that are better communicated. It's something small, but when you can actually get to where you want to go on a bike or on a bus, it has a huge impact for the environment and for the people who are living in a city and experiencing each other.
So the next thing I wanted to ask is, how you would then, the three of you, describe the table stakes for human-centered design in our present digital marketplace. What are these baseline requirements that we should be thinking about? How do we stay human-centric as technology continues to try and pull the chain harder and possibly break loose? Who wants to start with that?
I got it here. I think the most difficult part of this is the speed at which technology is evolving, and what it means to be human and human-centric as that evolves. You know, I mean, half generations are acting very different than the half generation before them because of the technological environment that they live in. So I think a real understanding of what it is to be human in this evolution of technology is probably the biggest struggle. So.
Yeah, I could piggyback on that. So like, I can't quote who, but I definitely didn't invent this idea that humanity is more or less defined as a species by our usage of tools. Like it's really hard to separate us from tools. Like we are not. It is part of what defines us. I'm piggybacking what he's saying when I say that. So to understand that as our tools get more sophisticated, they become more articulate, they are able to do more things, they become more intelligent, and we intentionally or unintentionally start to give those tools values. A lot of the time when we're designing in a very unintentional way, we accidentally put our values into tools, and then those tools become really popular, and now we've accidentally enforced our personal values on an entire swath population or civilization. And that is I think like starting to be the problem that you're talking about is, you know, when it was a really sharp rock tied to a stick, there were certainly some values attached to that, but not the kind of values that are happening now when we've now built like social capital and collateral around something like Facebook, which, I mean, whether you think about it or not, is very much like a tool. It's a tool that we use to navigate social landscapes, and social landscapes are where we mostly live these days. I lost track of the original question.
Table stakes
yes,
for
table
human
stakes.
centrism.
For me, table stakes, the table stakes of human-centered design, it's just simply that human-centered design, I don't think that we've, in 20-something odd years of human-centered design, be able to like really all come together and agree on what makes that up. There's not like a hard set of rules. You can't point at this. I mean, people will often go, that's not, this is, that's not, this is. And those guys, most of the time, they just sound like jerks. There's really one thing I think that is like sort of an underlying foundation of human-centered design is the problem you're trying to solve. Have you framed it from the point of view of the people who are being affected by it? And then the way that you go about solving the problem should follow through on that framing, but depending on the context, you might have to use completely different sets of processes and tools. And as such, human-centered design can really be a foundation of any form of design. You can frame virtually any problem from the perspective of the people who are being affected by it. It isn't something that's like solely inherited to, you know, user interfaces, which is why you see so many of us kind of squeam when they call us UI designers or whatever. Yeah.
Very loudly. Hilary.
So thinking about this from the perspective of at what point when we're using technology does it start to change our concept of what it means to be human? I was thinking of your comment about sharp rock and stick, and I think I didn't share this at the beginning of the panel, but my background was in anthropology, and so the word for that is a Schulian hand axe. And it's, if you've ever seen them, they fit in the palm of your hand. They were developed 1 point odd, long time ago. They've been in use for thousands of years. And the way that each successive generation refined it just a little bit. I mean, it's a beautiful all-purpose tool. When I look at it, it makes me feel a little more connected to a person, and it's a person, like thousands of years ago, whose life experience is so completely different from my own. But I'm a descendant of that person. But now I have a phone in my pocket that connects me not just to people, but to systems run by corporations whose influence almost verges into, like, we're talking science fictional, it almost verges into this question of, like, at what point do their systems become part of me? Like, when I think of future design, I think about AI. And there's this interesting concept of the centaur, which is a human who is being aided by some sort of system. And Donna Haraway has an interesting, I mean, this is many, like from the 90s, but Donna Haraway's concept of cyborg theory, I think is really useful in this context of thinking about not just a human as the boundary of my body, but me and my phone and the things I can do in the environment and how those feed back into me. So I'm not just me, but I'm myself as I extend into this microphone, or I'm myself as I extend into my Acheulean hand axe. So I guess I would challenge the framing of human-centered. Like, I don't know where the boundary of human is.
That's more than fair. So I think going from there, I mean, I would push us to think about that in a couple of different ways. Mainly because I think about the way we kind of chase technological possibility, and we chase the possibilities of, okay, this technology will now give us the ability to do this thing faster or this thing better, connect more people to more other people at the same time, et cetera. And to the point of the hand axe, can we say that a technological development can be analogous to what Jeff Goldblum was saying in the movie Jurassic Park, when he'd say life finds a way, and that these systems are chaotic and you don't know what the results of making a paradigm shifting action in the landscape is going to be. You're going to introduce a new factor. So once upon a time, the axe got a little bit better, a little bit lighter, a little bit harder, less likely to crumble on impact or something like that, because they found a better rock, right? But now we're talking about systems that are far more integrated, far more subtle. What do you think we kind of think about when we think of technologies like Facebook is yet another manifestation of maybe not even one human, but all humans now being able to run a little bit faster and jump a little bit higher, so to speak?
Well, we were using the example of the hand axe, and I want to offer a counterexample, which is a woven net. Feminist anthropology deals a lot in weaving or textile, the manufacture of craft that involves a lot of social exchange, and especially crafts that don't stay in the archaeological record. So it's easier to find a hand axe from 50,000 years ago than it is a woven net. But you still are learning how to weave that net through your social relationships, whatever parent that is, like whatever sibling or village. It says so much about the network of people and knowledge and culture that you're meshed in, that you learn how to use that. And so especially for net weaving, like if you're making nets, someone has to teach you. You generally do it as a social activity. You're doing it because you're near water. I too have lost my thread. Let me cast my net out. What's the?
Well, it's about technology, isn't it? Can everyone hear me if I do this? About basically technology as an expression of basically furthered human evolution.
I don't want to tie the tool to being the thing that drives change. I think that culture can drive tool use. I think that culture is an equal and maybe greater driver than tools. Like, we decide what tools to use. We learn how to use tools from the people around us. We can stop using a tool based on the people around us. So especially in technology, I think we have a narrative of like, this product, which I'm trying to sell you, in front of me is going to drive our culture forward. We don't know what we're driving forward to, but we're going forward, and that's good. And my thing that you're gonna put in your pocket helps you do that, or my app that you put on your thing that you put in your pocket. I think that maybe the exchange is a little bit more complicated than just the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, I look at the definition of tool because I see Facebook not as a tool but an arena. I look at us as tools like Slack as an ability to have a social network that is around achieving a goal, and you have the communications and that's there. To me, and again, tool is a broad definition, but I always like to see some sort of growth in it, and with the studies coming out now about the negative factors of the majority of people falling into this environment and what it's doing to their lives. Yeah, I guess it's a tool for communication, but it's not a very effective tool, maybe a self-damaging tool. But again, on yours, that did come up through a culture. It came up. I honestly think that, again, the interjecting of bureaucracy of corporations and those sorts of things into an arena where they shouldn't have been, really had a lot to do with the destruction of that as what could have been a really amazing tool for activating people. Now I just think it's it's the oversaturation part. The person carrying the tool in the old days never carried the tool around 24 hours a day. They used the tool when they needed to use the tool. And right now, I feel like culturally right now we're saddled with these massive tool belts of tools that just bog us down. And your average person doesn't feel like they're really accomplishing anything. It's almost immobilizing. So I guess I'm off a little bit from where that was, but there are tools, and like to see you see how culturally we've changed just by having more viewpoints to more things. The younger generation coming in, having a single person against the arena of humanity much earlier in their lives than they had before, when it was me and my family, then me and my neighborhood, then me and my classroom. Very quickly it becomes something much much bigger that they are a player in. I think that, again, I think it's culture. I think it's an arena. I think it's those sorts of things in our technology right now that are, and will be in the future as we start to talk about AR, start blending identities and all of these sorts of things. That is really where we're going to see our civilization grow. The tools will continue to be tools and make all of those other things better, but I think exponentially things are going to get much more weirder, much more exciting, and much more game-changing for our civilization in the cultural arena.
So going back to this idea that there's an exchange, an interplay between the relationship of like people need a thing, they want to do a thing, they make a tool for the thing. The tool reflects values. Those values are then, I think, sometimes adopted by people who didn't originally have those, and then that's amplified. I mean, I think that's really where I land. There is a very, very, very complicated interplay of those two things. It's hard to track, and it's to some extent inevitable. We talk about a lot of these problems today like they're brand new problems. They're not. Cars, we were talking about cars earlier. We're talking about, like urban landscapes and bike paths. I mean, let's just remember that 80, 90 years ago, Minneapolis was a completely walkable city that had actually, an extremely effective public transit system based around rail cars. Okay, anybody can go back and look at the efforts of the automotive industry to lobby and pass laws that mandated that roads were only used for automobiles. I mean, the origin of the word jaywalking. Jaywalking was a derogatory term that was essentially like a fake news lobbying effort to make people feel stupid for walking in the street. These are what happens with these systems, even these ones that are destructive for us, that enforce like really nasty values. I mean, think about the awful human being you all become when you get in a car. I do it too. We become, these like psychopathic, sociopathic murder boxes where we lose all feeling and consideration for other people because they swerved funny. We just adopt these. We accept them as normal. We say it's easier, but, we spend 20 minutes trying to park at a place we could have walked to in 10. This is the world we live in. We create tools to solve a problem. We build systems to support those tools. Those systems change the way we think about the world. We adopt it so easily that those behaviors become invisible. We do this over and over and over, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, to be totally honest.
So I have to ask then, and I think we're already having this conversation, what are the risks of kind of losing the thread? So we stop being human-centered. Tomorrow, someone passes a new law, or someone says, oh, well, yeah, we spent a lot of time on research and trying to understand the people who a tool is going to serve, or the task that someone's going to accomplish with this new thing. Someone decides that's a terrible, terrible idea, or no one keeps interest and they won't spend the money on just understanding that layer anymore. What are the risks, basically? What kind of doomsday scenario can you paint for me and the rest of the room here about stopping being human-centric in a place where our tools are leaping high and hard to kind of accelerate everything and continue to accelerate even acceleration.
I think this goes back to that idea of like nature finds a way, right? I think that what's going to happen is what we're seeing like right now with like media real estate, right? Like right now, media real estate can target people. They can tell who you are. They can send commercials your way. They can go back to the corporations and say, listen, I got 20 commercials an hour in front of just the person you wanted, and I beat out all the competition to do that. But what they're not telling you is they ran that same one commercial 20 times in that hour and pissed off that one person they were trying to reach. So there's a whole shadow economy that's built on this. It's been there before. It was in there in radios and everything, and it'll continue to be there. I think what's going to happen is what we see in, sorry, I'm going to use more pop culture stuff, but like Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, you know, they're running Coke ads 40 stories up on buildings, 20 stories tall. Nobody on the streets can see them or gives a rat's ass. But God damn it, that guy at Coke beat out the guy at Pepsi to have that thing up there. And that'll always happen. And I think that once, you know, you're starting to see that, I mean, people I didn't think would backlash against Facebook once things started happening, backlashed. People I never thought would get out of Facebook are getting out of Facebook. I think what'll happen is that these systems will build it such a way that, yes, there'll be a lot of people suffering. There'll be a lot of people in the pens. There'll be a lot of people not cared for and exploited, just click cows, cash cows, whatever. But amount of the culture will move out of that again. It's just like the Renaissance after the Dark Ages. I say go for it. I say throw them all out the window if that means in 50 years from now I have a better relationship with my actual physical neighbor than I do with a million people in my social media, you know. So.
I want to grab on that real quick. So like here's the thing though, is this comes back to like our personal values and and you know how we enforce those, because I feel very similar. I feel like I have a very similar relationship with these like social networks. But the problem is that we have groups that frankly these networks were never necessarily designed for, who deeply benefit from these in ways that we don't actually like necessarily have to understand or grasp. You know, I think of like the trans community. I think of like racial minority groups in like larger cities. You know, the way if I could like blow up Twitter tomorrow based on the kind of anger I feel towards the crap I read on a day-to-day basis, I probably would. But then, you know, I know people who are like trans. I know people who are like in Somali community here who they use that, and that's a way that they lift their community up. That's the way they communicate, and that's the way they meet new people. And so that's the problem with a lot of these. I like calling an arena. These arenas is that the way that we move through them and you know we absorb these like sort of positive and negative values. The felt experience is so different from person to person. You know, that's true objectivity. The thing is it's not that it lacks good qualities or bad qualities. It's that it encompasses good qualities and bad qualities, and your ability to judge it as one or the other is entirely based on your perspective, your point of view looking into it.
There are a lot of dystopias I could draw from. Some recent ones would be like A Handmaid's Tale or Altered Carbon, if anyone's been watching that yet. Yeah. But for me, it comes to treating people as mere means to an end. And probably the expression of that I see most today that I think could carry on is trying to quantify emotion or trying to quantify parts of a person without, it's like how much of your personality or your subjective experience is machine readable. I know that everything that makes me up wouldn't be captured by a current computer system. Even if you could read, we were talking about this earlier, like the blood flow on my face, and like that means that she's 30% chance lying. But I could be thinking about, I could be having some sort of physiological response to a stress that I was just reminded of that I'm not conscious of. Like, it's just so complicated, and so to be reducing people to some sort of quantified state, and to keep thinking that that's more true than what someone says about themselves, I would like to avoid that and keep complexity and keep uncertainty. Like sort of the idea of when you're watching a movie or you're reading a book and the narrator isn't reliable, I don't think they should ever be quantifiable. I don't think that other people should ever be perceived as being knowable. I just think it's important for us to maintain a sense of people as being a little bit mysterious or unknowable or owning themselves, no matter what we do.
Okay, so I've got a tangent. This isn't on the question guide. I circulated questions in advance. By show of hands, including on the panel, who is aware of the TV show Black Mirror and the episode 15 million credits? Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is first season. This is an episode in which people are working really hard every day, many of them on treadmills, basically, or basically stationary bikes, to basically generate power. And as they generate power and do other things in the course of the day, they either generate credits or they spend credits. So if you watch a particular program you want to watch and it's not what they're pumping to you at the moment, you're going to spend credits for that. If you don't want to watch the thing they're pumping to you at the moment, you're going to spend credits to not watch that thing. So your media is controlled, your life is very contained. And if you fall behind in production far enough, you change jobs, you stop generating power and you start cleaning up the trash. And a lot of that setup, just in and of itself, was interesting enough to me without the idea of this kind of, what's the word that I want? What's the TV show that with Simon Cowell in it that I can't think of the name of? Yeah, American Idol, where you could get out of this treadmill space and basically give yourself the life of luxury if you had enough talent to amuse the population one way or another. And then how people's attempts to build up all of these credits, 15 million credits, to get an opportunity to sit in a room and basically maybe impress the judges and maybe get this thing, and then have that then basically co-opted whatever your talent was, whatever you wanted to do. Now the system's going to quantify you and decide, oh, well, yeah, that was cute, what you wanted to do, but we're going to use you like this. This is how you fit into our entertainment industrial complex. And I'm wondering how kind of this particular dystopia sounds a lot like the conversation that we've been having about agency and about how you are part of a system, and how, to the point of advertising, you now can say, all right, well, I've got you. You're going to see this, and I can even penalize you if you don't watch this, because people are relying on the fact that you are getting impressions and people are seeing this media or this ad that you're pumping out.
I just say that the most important app on any phone or any device is the off button. Thank God we live in an opt-out society where we can turn it off if we want. I mean, that's kind of a difference in this thing. Although that line's getting really blurred. People don't realize, you know, that what once was a luxury is now something very, very heavy. You know, I had an example this last year. At the end of the school year, my daughter's school sent out an email with 5 apps you could put on your kid's phone to help them be mindful over the summer. And I'm just like, really? Like, I hope my daughter's not on her phone. I hope it's stuck in her backpack while she's, you know, out playing or riding her bike. And so, anyways, I guess that's a little bit of an aside. But yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I think, you know, to your point, people are already checking out. Like, you can be in that arena and have a community, and that tool's working for you, or, you know, and you're not even seeing any of the corporate stuff that's happening anymore. They can mine and they can send stuff to your, you know, they can put stuff on your screen, they can do whatever. But if you're not looking at it, it doesn't matter. It's just going to burn out their funds. Their fear is going to get greater. They're going to spend more money and those sorts of things, which is great. But I think, you know, we'll find a way to get out from underneath it if we, as long as that gate's open. Like, I would hate for there to not be that option for somebody to not be on all the time or to be that strapped in. But you know, obviously we're seeing with the, you know, the amount of people, you know, the physical and mental backlash against the people being in these environments for too long nowadays, that you know, it's a addictive process as well, like methamphetamines that could be used to, you know, just like that, to prostitute people. So anyways.
I think the most horrifying thing about Black Mirror, doesn't matter what episode you're watching, is what people have opted into on their own. And what people, like, the reason that the show is scary is because you're not a part of that world. You're this viewer from outside with a different set of values than the people who live inside of that world. Inside of that world, those guys ride those bikes every day. They've been doing it their entire lifetime, presumably. They really go out of their way in that particular episode not to give you a lot of context about how they got to where they are. so you don't really know how long civilization's been doing that. You don't know what it's like outside of those massive complexes of buildings. That's intentional. What you're left to believe and understand about that is the world, that is the way it's always been, and that is what normal life looks like to those guys, and that's why it's horrifying to you. You know, they're not horrified, right? And that's what's horrifying. So, like, you know, we could talk about whether that actually reflects true humanity or not. I think that takes a very particularly dark point of view about humanity, that, you know, happiness is relative to what you're used to, that there's not any sort of objective measure of happiness. There's, you know, we could go back and forth about that for a really, really long time. I'm not sure what the value would be to these guys, but to get back to the thread, I just, if we're talking about how we design for people, to like design for the best for people, you have to kind of get in your head like what you think a person is, and you have to kind of have in your head what's best for them. And it's frankly it's patriarchal. We're taking a paternal point of view. We, like, designers frequently, whether they want to admit it or not, are holding deep down inside of their minds that they know what's best for people, whether those people know what's best for them or not. And in fact, we say it a lot. It's the #1 reason that designers like to say, well, we don't just ask users what they want. Because a lot of the time, you know, yada, 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 if I designed what people asked for, I would design a faster horse, yada, yada, yada.
The Henry Ford quote.
Yes, right.
We all know the Henry Ford quote? Okay, good.
We've all, you know, we've beat that particular faster horse to death, right? So, like, I'm going to try and button this up here because I can feel a ramble coming on. But we have to find a balance between reflecting what people truly are and what we kind of hope people are. That's based on our values.
I know I used Black Mirror in my presentation earlier. I think Black Mirror is a really useful tool. Getting back to tools. But really, like, screw Black Mirror. Like, it is too dark. We've had enough. If you've watched the latest season of Black Mirror, like, Black Mirror evokes a certain feeling for a reason. Every episode ends as grimly as possible. And I think it's useful to start a conversation with someone if they're still inhabiting the space that technology is good and they don't want to, or they just haven't been challenged to get out of that space yet. So you can usually drop Black Mirror as a sort of like, it's like sticking your foot in the door to be like, hey, wait a second, like maybe the thing you're thinking about isn't great for people. But I think I'd like to see more, not utopia, because the dichotomy is kind of uncomplicated, but I want to see more science fiction on TV or in books or participatory, whatever, that's about potential alternatives, not necessarily good ones, but ones that aren't as like determinedly dystopian, because what you put out there creates the railroad tracks that people think is possible. And I've just seen a lot of dystopia, and I haven't seen a lot of like weird alternatives, not utopias, but just complicated, inhabitable, strange worlds that are futures that are complicated that I can still imagine living in.
All right, so I want to make sure we get some time for questions and answers too. But I do want to kind of give you one last question. Again, this is not strictly speaking on the previous list. So Matt, you raised a really interesting point in that all designers kind of take on this kind of persona of whether we admit it or not, we know best. The Henry Ford moment occurs again and again and again. What is it about being human-centered and about human centrism that helps designers, whether they're working in technology or the next sharper rock on a stick, to avoid that particular trap?
Sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
How does human centrism stop us being that designer who knows best? What is it that's important about human centrism? Why should anyone in this room care if the next product, the last product, or the product they've just bought today had any thread of human centrism to it at all?
Well, I'd like to use products and inhabit a world created by people who understand that other people have an internal life that's just as rich as theirs. Like, all of you are having complicated thoughts and feelings and emotions and memories like I am right now. And that, to me, is what it means to be, it's the first step to being human-centered, is having the understanding that you're not the most complicated or the most special person in the room. You're not the protagonist. You're the protagonist of your own life, but most people don't think about you. Like, in that conception of that more humble, and I don't mean humility as a buzzword. I mean, like, you know, your late 20s realization that it's like, oh, this is adult life. Okay, like my small impact that I can have.
Yeah. So I've been on a tear like this whole time about values. Like, the thing is I think the real trouble comes when we implicitly add our values to designs without any sort of intention. I don't think it's necessarily bad for a design to have. I don't think it's bad for a design to have values or have the values of the designer who created it at all. I just think that what we need to really be careful for is doing that with intention, because, you know, a lot of the times, you know, like most of us hate ourselves a little bit, right? Like, I don't really want to accidentally put the worst parts of myself into things. I want to put the best parts of myself into things, you know? So, like, it's okay if the people who encounter our stuff don't have the same values as us, because, first of all, they're going to integrate this into their life and they're going to make it useful for themselves. If we design things in a good way, they're going to be able to do that easily. If they encounter values through it that we've intentionally placed there that maybe not be something that they've encountered on a day-to-day basis or something they necessarily agree with, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be like a world-building thing. It can help us connect to each other. It can broaden their horizons or mine. And that comes through good research and good process. That comes from putting things out in the world, seeing how it reflects back, listening, being open to change, not assuming that you're correct with your initial premise, your premise being this design you put out there.
Why anybody should care if their product is had any human human focused design put into it? I don't think anybody should, but I think people notice it when it happens. I mean, that was the Apple, the iPhone changed the marketplace because they thought about people, and it's not new. I mean, Eames did it back in the 50s. You know, just really thinking about putting people into it. People will notice. I think, you know. How do we not put ourselves in it? I go into every single situation that I have to do a user experience project, just not knowing anything. I'm not that smart. I can't control everything, but I can relate to people and I can talk to people and I can ask questions and I can listen. And I think as an artist, I can feel a little bit. And I can even go through, a heartless corporation or a bunch of guys who just want to go make a profit off of an app, and I can hear the ounces of humanity in that, and try to marry those together into something that'll have a positive, social, emotional, whatever, more positive experience, and hopefully, that's noticeable against an app that didn't have a UX designer on it. So,
All right. With that, I'm going to stand up and surrender this microphone to whoever wants to come forward and ask a question. If you don't have questions, I'm happy to torture the panel with further questions. Does anyone want to stand up and ask questions? Now, mind you, if you're way up there, oh, hi. If you're way up there, that may be a little tricky, but yeah, we could, oh, yes, you could also yell. Do you want to come up and use the mic?
To Hilary's point of visible examples laying the tracks of what happens, what are some pro-social, positive, good, existing design technology products out there that are notable to you?
We spend so much time talking about negative examples that sometimes it's hard, they exist, but it's hard to recall good ones.
Difficult to find a good story.
When my daughter was in 6th grade, they had an experimental program where the kids were going out and learning technologies to create presentations, to create films. Because of the tools that were available to them, they ran a program called 101 Ways to Show What You Know. And what they could never do the same thing twice. There were no tests. They could come through and do a movie poster. They could do a board game. They could do a dance. They could do a drawing. They could do a puzzle. They could do all these sorts of things. And a lot of them, a lot of the ones I said were pretty analog, but a lot of it was very digital. And it was amazing to take and, they had a technology presentation for the parents where the kids taught us all the technology that they were using. And, I work in this, and there was, some of these, cloud-based collaborative platforms that these kids are using at 6 years old to put together films that were really amazing. Or even just do Project Magic. And this is a public school in the suburbs. So to me, that was extremely aspirational. Again, because these are tools. They're using them as tools. They're able to use them to accomplish the purpose and move on. And they'd been designed so well that a 6th grader felt like, I'm not even saying empowered. These kids, it was just natural for them, which is wonderful. And to see them to be able to do those things, explore themselves, find their ways of being able to communicate, and to be able to create something that could be out there to deliver their point of view, I think that's the strongest positive, result of a lot of, human-centric design nowadays. Even in the tools that we get to use. Even the way the web works and looks and moves and our devices do versus the way they did 15 years ago is beautiful. So.
It's going to sound trite after that, but in my day-to-day life, Spotify. A couple of things. First, I really like the Discover Weekly playlist because it's like having this weird relationship with the algorithm where I wonder what it knows about me, or it makes me reflect on like, what have I been listening to this week? Like, what are you getting back from me that I'm not realizing I'm like putting into the environment? I like the 6 playlists that it changes throughout the week or throughout the month as you start listening to other things, so I can watch my own taste change. And I like having, because it's not like it's sending me an email with like, your taste, you're moved into R&B, 46%. It's just that I have to go look at it and like, oh, I'm getting a lot of these kinds of songs. And is it because like my coworker sent me an album of their genre that they like, and so now the computer is like putting that into my profile? And finally, being able to see a new song and then find other songs like it and just start going down that rabbit hole. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do that 15 years ago. And there are probably people who are really fond of album stores and that more analog physical discovery and the socializing that goes with that. And I can definitely, like, that would be a conversation to have too. But in my personal life, like, Spotify is just a little bit of organization and joy.
So, yeah, mine's really quick. Contrary to what a lot we've been talking about here, I actually think a lot of the best human-centered stuff hasn't necessarily been completely intentional. Proliferation of cheap technology has been really good for the world at large. So the fact that you can buy a very effective digital camera for practically nothing these days has had a massive and very important impact on the world around us. And the fact that you can now combine that with cloud-based storage and social media means that like issues are coming to the forefront from underrepresented groups, and the world is being forced to examine themselves and think about how we can move together better.
So I got 2 questions and 5 minutes, 3 questions and 5 minutes. So it's time for lightning round. So I saw the hands in this order, 1, 2, 3. So you get to ask your question first.
My question is, so we've been talking about human-centered design, and I've been kind of mulling whether it's human as a species or human as an individual, and what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I've been mulling around on this idea a little bit, that because we talk about like the waves of human-computer interaction design, HCI, UX, whatever you want to call it. The third wave is when we really started to talk about like the human-centered like focus, and I'm starting to wonder whether we've already started to move into a 4th wave that we just haven't quite realized we've done, where we're starting to talk about cultural design, like designing for groups, large groups of people, because large groups of people behave and have different expectations as a mass. Much more, it's a completely different set of design considerations and problems than what you have when you're thinking about an individual.
Must go much quicker.
What's that?
Must go much quicker. Okay.
Yeah.
I just mean answering. We must answer questions faster.
Sorry.
I just go back to what you used a phrase before, people impacted by the technology versus just a user. So many times people think human centered design is just about the user, and it really is. It's just about the user, but also those impacted by it. So I think it's both sides of that.
There's a river in New Zealand that now has legal protection and is considered a legal person. So I would say that human should extend to beings outside of human, and that is going to be a longer conversation too for all of us as a group, but I don't think that we necessarily have the right to look at an octopus and say, like, my cognition and experience is more profound than yours. They have a lot of the same biological tissues that lead towards consciousness. We don't understand consciousness well enough to say, like, you're dinner and I don't care if you feel pain when I eat you. Like.
Question 2.
It's actually more of a comment. There's a book called The Evolution of Technology by George Basala, and it was part of my curriculum at MCAD, but a lot of what Hilary was saying about hand axe and woven net, that sort of stuff, and just the nature of the title itself, I think will tell you why it's interesting and relevant to this conversation. I encourage people to check it out. And then I just wanted to say that at one point in the conversation you were talking about like a narrative versus data points, and I think that's really important to consider in our work, that not everything is about the hard data, that there's a user story that we take into consideration and equally important. And that's just it.
Response really, really quick. Sentence or 3?
Sentence or 3. Data is also subjective. Who gathers the data, what they're influenced by, what they think is important, what they don't even notice that they're not noticing, and how we use that to construct a person. So when we say quant and qual, like, I can see why that's useful conversationally, but that's not the whole picture.
And design subjective too, so put them together and there you got it.
I have nothing to add.
So with deep fakes and Nicolas Cage's face showing up literally everywhere on the internet recently, and piggybacking off of what the previous speaker said, so much of human-centered design deals with understanding the human and the culture, as you guys talked about earlier. But, I mean, we have massive cultural shifts where so-called fake news, where people have different understandings of things that have different bases. How does human-centered design change in a world where people can't tell Nicolas Cage from Amy or Rachel McAdams?
Thorny, have at it.
I have a clarifying question. Is this about the algorithmically generated porn? No, it's not. Okay.
It's just...
Or not algorithmic.
It's just artificially changed. I mean, the same thing they did with Carrie Fisher in Star Wars.
Right.
It
yeah.
doesn't. It's not necessarily porn itself. Yeah.
So the example that came out was that this past week, and it was an issue of consent, and it was also an issue of consensus reality, because we are now able to, like, that was 2 years ago. The technology has gotten much more complex. It's really hard to tell the difference between the original performance and the one with the mapped face. They actually shut down the Reddit channel that was called Fake, Real Fakes, something. Deep fakes, yeah. So Reddit shut it down, which is sort of a first shot fired across the bow of what we think should be acceptable or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think this is one of those things where you're just going to shoot so many holes in the bucket that nobody will believe any news anymore. And frankly, I don't think that would be a bad thing.
Nothing?
I guess I've been heads down on my work too much this week. I got some news reading to do, apparently.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah. Consent is always going to be a complicated issue, because we're always going to be pushing on the boundaries of what we think we are as people and what rights we have, what we consider to be ourselves. Our consciousness expands outside of ourselves into our tools, and our tools are changing, so will our perception of self. We're going to have to keep talking about consent. It's never going to stop.
And it's also thorny because consent is something that is kind of an ephemeral concept as well, because what I'm okay with today, I might not be okay with tomorrow. And do I have a conception of the day tomorrow when I'm not okay anymore? Or
you might say something, and then once you've passed away, people still do what you asked them not to do. Like, case in point, last week, we heard that Prince was going to be a hologram during the Super Bowl, and he expressly said in an interview that he never wanted to be presented in a virtual way after his death. And the final performance wasn't necessarily a hologram, unless you think video projected onto a sheet is a hologram. But it was definitely it was a point where, like, they did it anyway, even though he said he didn't want it. So.
Well, thank you everyone for coming and listening. We hope this has been informative for you. Thank you for coming to DevFest, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.